Thank you, everyone. It's good to see some of you familiar faces from last night and my dreams. I want to start with 3 questions. Raise your hand if you know, roughly speaking, within 10-20 cents, the price per gallon to fill your car. Okay, keep your hand up if you know, roughly speaking, within 10-20 cents, the price per gallon to heat your home. Yeah, no, a couple liars, that's cool. Raise your hand if you use a credit card. Okay, just special little note, raise your hand if you use your husband's credit card. Where is that woman from? Where is she? Sir, why are you? Anyway, keep your hand up. The credit card users, keep your hand up if at the end of the month you know exactly what your credit card bill will be. Okay, a few more people. It's impressive. Most people don't. Final question. Raise your hand if at some point in the last week you promised yourself you were going to wake up the next day and get some exercise. Okay? Now keep your hand up if raising your hand is all the exercise you've gotten this week. So I ask these questions to point out how difficult it is to think about money, how difficult it is to think about change and human nature. Right? The first question, essentially, what's the price per gallon of energy? But in one context, one framing, we know it. The other, we don't. Right? The second question shows like how if we separate time of consumption from the time of paying for something, we're liable to forget what it is. Right? And the third is really about self-control. How we can't keep promises even to ourselves, even promises we know are going to help us live longer and better. Right? And I want to talk about these things in the context of money for 3 reasons. Number one, money is everywhere. It's omnipresent. Right? It's overwhelming, and that's just something we have to accept. We're married to money, for better or worse. Right? Whether we're living in scarcity and it's a constant pressure, or even if we have abundance. Right? Nobody watches the lifestyles of the frugal and thrifty. You know? They think about money and spending it, right? And having it. Right? Number 2, money is actually an amazing gift we've been given. Right? I used to be in the money is evil, root of all evil group, but actually, I've come to realize money money is divisible. Right? Money is general. You can use it for anything. It's storable. It's fungible. Any $10 is the same as another $10. And all of this has given us the opportunity to develop modern society, right? To specialize. You wouldn't be able to specialize without money. Right? We couldn't be research professors. We couldn't be winemakers. We couldn't be whatever Liz is. Unicorn, yes. And that's fantastic. But those wonderful things about money are also what make it challenging. And it becomes challenging because of the third reason why I want to talk about it is because it reflects human nature. Right? The forces that impact our financial decision making are the same forces that affect our decision making in every aspect of our lives. And ultimately, it's about human nature. And I don't think you can change human nature. But what we can do is we can understand human nature and then create systems, environments, messaging around that human nature so that we take advantage of our human nature instead of being taken advantage of. Right? And it's a challenge. It's not about education and understanding how money works. Like for me, like as Liz mentioned, I went to Princeton, right? And then I went to law school in Burning Man 2 or 5 times. But I went to Princeton and I studied from the best. Ben Bernanke was a professor, Alan Blinder, the other white guy. And I learned about economics. I learned how decision making should work, right? Like it should be about opportunity costs. Right? Again, money can be anything. So when you think about a financial decision, you should think about the opportunity costs, which is what are you giving up? If you don't spend this money here, what could you spend it on now or anytime in the future? That's really hard to do. I mean, that's like overwhelming. You know, that $5 coffee everyone uses as an example? Well, that could be 5 packs of gum, or that could be, compound interest, $1 million retirement. Like, that's just hard. And we don't even come close to doing that. Right? My co-author did an experiment, went to a Toyota dealership, said if you don't spend $30,000 on a Toyota, what else could you spend it on? People weren't like, oh, that's 5 vacations, or I could retire half a year earlier, it's a boatload of bubble gum. Right? They couldn't think of anything. And when pressed, all they got was, well, if I don't buy a Toyota, I could buy a Honda. Right? So what happens is we can't think about opportunity costs, so we find shortcuts. We find value cues. We find other ways to make it easier to make these decisions. Right? And what our book talks about, and what I like to talk about in greater depth and give more time, is what these forces are. Because when we understand the forces, when we understand why people make certain decisions, then we can help use that knowledge to help them make better decisions. I want to talk about just a few, depending on how much time I have. There's a thing called pain of paying. The pain of paying is this concept that when we pay for something, when we hand over a $20 bill, it stimulates the same region of our brain as physical pain. Right? Now, pain has an evolutionary purpose. Right? You put it teaches us to pay attention to what's happening. Right? You put your hand on a stove, that burn says, oh, look at your hand, move it. Right? You break your leg, that pain says, oh, go to a doctor. Right? In 7th grade, you call up Megan Flaherty, you say, hey, you want to go out? She says, who's this? And you say, it's Jeff. And she says, Jeff who? You become a comedian. But we don't feel pain. Instead, humans, we numb that pain. Right? We make it so that we don't have to think about stuff. Right? And when we don't think about financial decisions, when we're not aware of it, then we're less likely to think about those opportunity costs, less likely to think about the things that are important. And what's really, kind of key and exciting about the pain of paying is you can dial it up or you can dial it down. Right? Like there's a whole spectrum. Think about paying cash is the most painful, checks, then credit cards. Right? I mean, there are numerous studies. Credit cards make you spend more, tip more, and you're less likely to remember how much you spent. Not only that, but this is one study blew my mind. Excuse me. Just credit card paraphernalia, like a little Discover card thing and the machine. Even that has the same effect. Spend more, tip more, remember less. Not as strong, but still, it's like Pavlovian, right? Instead of drooling over, a dinner bell or Idris Elba, we're drooling over credit cards. Okay. So there's credit cards. There's fintech. All these things, Apple Pay and Easy Pass and automatic billing, right? And then there's whatever the future is, like the Amazon store where you don't have to do anything. Easy paying, no, that's terrible. Right? You don't think about what you're spending. Right? So there's this whole spectrum of levels of pain of paying, and we can dial it up or dial it down depending on what we want to have the result be. I think about if you might say, well, the best thing to make the best spending is to have it be really high. You feel the pain of paying at all times. Yes, but what if you're like at a restaurant and you're paying per bite? Now, you're going to value every bite, but it's going to be a miserable experience, right? Or maybe you shove a bunch of food in your mouth. Right? At the same time, you think about retirement savings. It's a huge issue. I like to say in America we have we're a retirement obesity epidemic, but no one knows they're fat. In retirement savings, they've shown if you make your default option when you sign up at a company that you will give to your retirement, people are way more likely to save, right? Because they just don't want to deal with the pain of thinking about that decision. Right? So if the default is no, they won't. At the same time, retirement savings, think about management fees, right? Let's imagine, for fun, we all have a $1 million portfolio, because that's nice math, and $1 million, I live in New York, that'll get you a nice studio apartment to share. 1% management fee. Right? You never see that fee, you never think about if it's worth it, right? But what if, like, at the end of the year, instead of just coming in your statements, you had to pay your broker $10,000? Right? Then you think about that. You feel that pain, you think, is that a good decision? Right? So we can twist that pain of paying up and down. And there's so many other biases, so many other behavioral principles that come into play with money. In life, there's issues of fairness, right? We'll pay a locksmith who fumbles around and messes about and breaks things for an hour, pay that locksmith more than one that just opens it in a minute because it looks like they're doing great and like, oh, we can value it, right? We think we know what the effort is, right? Same time, we could put that principle into practice. Government does a terrible job of showing you what their tax dollars are doing, right? We have no idea, so we think there's no effort made. But we can design systems. Boston, they did a whole pilot program where everyone's complaining about potholes on their street and they never saw any work done because there were like thousands of potholes. So they made a website that showed each day we're fixing 5 potholes. You might not see it, but your tax dollars are at work. So there are all these ways that we can use all these behavioral principles to our benefit. And I really have become a huge convert to the Church of Behavioral Science. And I'm excited about it. I went from those Princeton days where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, to now a moment where like I'm a real advocate for all the work that we've heard about here and everything else, because it gives us the opportunity to experiment and learn. And it's not perfect, but it holds such promise. And I want to quickly tell a story of an experiment that my co-author did in Kenya. They went there, wanted to improve savings in this very poor community. No one had any savings. They live week to week. So they created this app, this mobile app where you could just put money each week into a savings account. And that savings account was like in a different town, so pain of paying, they couldn't pull the money out. They created a few different setups. One was just a basic app. One was an app, and each week you got a text message reminding you to save. Then you would get a text message, but it was made to seem like it came from your children. Mommy, Daddy, please save for my future. All right? Then they also gave people a coin with 24 numbers on it for 20 for each week, and each time you saved, you made a little strike in the coin, you put it up on your mantle. Right? Then they had a savings system where you would get a 10 or 20% match. Right? You save $10, we'll give you $1 or $2. They did the same thing, but they used loss aversion. Loss aversion, the idea that we feel a loss more than we feel the joy of an equivalent pain. Right? You lose $10, you'd have to win 20 to feel the equivalent emotion. So they would put the money in your account, that $2, and if you didn't match it, they would pull it out. So we don't have time for me to ask what you think was the best system. But I'll tell you, just the app made people save more. Right? The app with the text reminder, a little bit more. The app with 10 or 20% match, the 10 or 20% was the same, a little bit more. 10 or 20% with loss aversion, a little bit more. The message from the kids, the same as that loss aversion. So, use your kids. But the most effective one was the coin. Was a little coin where you scratch off. It wasn't like getting more money. It was about understanding human emotion and human nature. Because when you're poor and you don't bring home food and put it on the table and you save it, there's no way to see that. But if you have something that encourages that dialogue and says, I'm doing something for the family and our future, then that has an impact. And that's about human nature. That's about our behavior, our decision, our biases. And what I love most about this study is that is not the result they expected. Right? But they were open-minded. They were scientists. They didn't go in with a bias. They said, let's see what happens. And then you can build off that. That's why I'm really excited for all the promise that behavioral science holds. And I want to leave you all with one last little behavioral science tidbit. I'm working on this website about behavioral science, and we have these things called nerd nuggets. And one nerd nugget is, well, there's two I want to talk about. One is called peak end rule, the idea that whatever happens at the end of an experience disproportionately colors your view of the experience. And to that end, this is it. What would Batman do? What would Batman eat? Right? It's a little nerd nugget that says if you put kids in front of a bowl of candy and a bowl of vegetables, they're going to eat the candy. Right? But if you say to those kids, hey, what would Batman eat? They're going to think, oh, Batman's strong. He's healthy. Right? He fights crime. There's a little improvement towards the vegetables. So you can use that for your own families at home. Just remember, Batman was also a billionaire, so he probably stole the candy and sold it back to the kids at a markup. My name is Jeff, you guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.